Recording. Hey, welcome everybody to this empowerment podcast. I'm Dr. John Morgan here with my colleague, Pastor Tim Hargrove, and we are excited to be with you today. This is our first podcast of 2022. And if you are enjoying these podcasts, we want to ask you to help us out. Would you like and would you share our podcasts on your social media? That will help us build our empowerment community. So for this kickoff podcast for this year, Pastor Tim is going to take the lead on this, and we have a special guest that we are excited to interview today, and Tim will also introduce him. So Tim, I know you're struggling with the kind of a scratchy voice,
a little bit.
But let's do it, man. Let's hear what's going on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me welcome Ryan Kimbrel to our podcast today. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Tim, John.
Ryan, good to see you, brother.
Yeah. So Ryan came into my life about almost 6 years ago now, when we were in a men's group together at Pinion Hills Church, and he came in with a group of guys, and I'm like, oh, great, one more tall guy to add to the mix in the room. And Ryan was a young guy in his mid-20s at this point, working in the auto industry. And we just hit it off, didn't we? And the men's group became this great time of connection and growth in Ryan's life. And so welcome, Ryan. Tell us where you're living and kind of how, we'll get into your story here in a minute, but just tell us where you're living and what you're doing.
Well, I'm living in a remote area in the United States named Hooker, Oklahoma. And I recently moved from Durango, Colorado. Still bounce back and forth some, but live in farm country in the Oklahoma Panhandle. And we grow groceries for cattle. My wife likes to call it a caviar for cattle specifically.
There you go.
Specialized feed.
Yeah, it's such a great story. And Ryan and I also worked together in an auto group for a while, and did a lot of work in leadership development with the executive team there for quite a period of time, for over a year. And so it was a great run. And I'm going to get into that change that's been made in your life here in a minute. One of the things I want to do is throw out to you guys today is this area of resolutions. And so I love starting a new year, and I love New Year's resolutions. I know not everybody feels excited about them. Sometimes people are like kind of critical of them. And I don't think there's a problem with the resolutions. I think it's a problem with the resolutioner. Okay. I think it's the challenge. And so I want to talk with you guys about resolutions. John, tell me how do you feel about resolutions? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Where are you at on it?
It's weird. I'm a both and. So I don't like them in the sense that I never quite fulfill my resolutions for how much exercise I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And what my weight loss is going to be. So I always feel a little defeated on that one. But I do like the rollover of a new year, because you know how it is. We're doing in PPI right now. We're evaluating where are we, where do we want to get long term. So what does 2022 mean for us? And it really is clarifying for us some of our top priorities. I love that, because I hate not working on a plan to get where I'm trying to go. And so it just serves as that time to get clarity on that. So in that sense, I like it.
Yeah. And same for you, Ryan. How do you feel about resolutions? I have a feeling you just want 2022 to be exactly the same as 2021, right?
Yeah. No, I use December every year to really try to reflect on what went right, what went wrong, what was a disaster, and what actions can I take so I don't get the same story, the same result in the following year. I do a pretty good job of always going back to what lesson did I get and then trying to use that in the next year. So I like resolutions. I'm with John. The exercise one is always tough.
Yeah.
But as far as my faith and my business, I think it's a really good time to reflect and execute in the new year.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff, man. So making a resolution means that you're resolving to do something. And you're saying and what I want to challenge with our listeners is to come into the new year and say, I resolve to do something that's going to produce a different result in my life. And it's a big challenge, and we're going to cover an important topic. I want to share with you. Let me do a little screen share here. I want you to see a quote by Stephen Covey, who's one of my favorite authors. Stephen Covey says this: one thing's for sure. If we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. And, I had this last year was both some of the greatest things that I've experienced in my life and my ministry, and also some of the hardest things that we've experienced in our life and our family. And it all happens in the same year. And I think that's just how life works. But on my end, in the areas that I have some control over, we don't have control over much, but I do get to have control over my choices. And so I want to go into this new year thinking about what do I need to do differently. In fact, it brings me to my favorite question. And this ties into some of our really core teaching at PPI. What else can I do to create the results that I want? What else? I don't like thinking that I don't have any other options, that I don't have any other choices. I also don't like making excuses or just blaming circumstances or life or other people, or if we're going to start making excuses and making a list of people to blame for the outcomes in our life, then we're going to be really busy doing that, and we're not going to really be focused on the steps that we can take to create new results. And so that's a big part of it. So I'm going to talk about 6 resolutions in January in my blog, but today what I want to do is I want to introduce the one resolution that has to come first. And it really is foundational, I believe, to doing the other 5. And so, for instance, something always has to come first. In other words, you have, let me give you an example. You have to get dressed before you leave the house, right?
That helps.
Yes. Now, Ryan, when you live out on a farm by yourself, that's not really a requirement, is it?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want out there, man.
Yeah. My wife, she's from Oklahoma City, and when we lived on the farm this summer, she's, man, I don't even have to get dressed to take the trash out. I can just go out.
Yeah. See,
I said, there's just cattle there to see what's going on. That's it.
Yeah. So my neighbors in Phoenix are really hoping that I always get dressed first and then leave the house, right?
Yes.
So that's always important. And here's the most important resolution. So, for instance, we could talk about many things that are very important. I'm going to talk about 5 more this month, but this is number 1 for a reason. And here's the first one that I want you to land on today. And this is our whole topic of conversation today. In 2022, I resolved to grow. So here's the thing about life. Growth is intentional. It's not automatic. I've noticed that I don't have to do anything to maintain the status quo in my life. I don't have to do anything different. And I don't have to do anything to just repeat the past. So if I just want to repeat the last year or the last few years of my life again this year, then I don't really have to do anything. But for those of us that say, look, I don't want that, I want something different than that, then I think we have to resolve to do something. And one of the things I've always believed was that growth makes everything better. Growth makes everything better. If I want to be a better husband, if I want to be better in business, better in ministry, a better leader, just a better person, then growth is an essential requirement for me to get better at anything that I want to get better at. And we're going to talk about 3 areas to grow in today that are pretty big areas. First of all, before we jump into the 3, just give me a little feedback on growth for you. John, talk to me a little bit about growth and why do you feel it's important?
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely that the nature of a successful life, really the most fulfilled life, and I think the life that fulfills God's purpose for you is a life where you're always growing and you're intentionally trying to grow. You know, as when we were working together in pastoral ministry, one of the things that would frustrate me is when I would see people that seemed to me like they just wanted to learn the basics of what it took to do their job, and they wanted to repeat the same tasks for 30 years, live for the weekend, and then ultimately live for retirement and never grow.
Yeah,
And so 30 years on, they're not a deeper person.
right.
They didn't really grow in their faith. They didn't grow in what they're going to, their knowledge and skills about an industry or some new challenge in their life. And so, I mean, I deeply believe it's God's purpose for us to continue growing until we die.
Yeah,
You know, as the Apostle Paul said, I forget what is behind. I'm not going to rest on my laurels, and I'm going to press forward to the high calling of Christ, what Christ's purpose is for me, and whatever area I need to grow in. I'm gonna trust God. We'll learn this and we'll grow in it. So I think it's just huge.
yeah. And I love with Ryan being a farmer. You know, one of the things that we found in our teaching at PPI is the agricultural symbolism is very powerful everywhere in the world. And when we talk to people about growing, we talk to them about this whole process as if they were growing something. And whether they're growing their and their character or some area or growing their wealth. And I want to give you 3 areas today, guys, that are essential areas I think that to grow in. So we could just leave it and say, well, growth is important and let's do that. But let's be more specific. I want to take you down into 3 areas. So here's the first one. The first is to resolve to grow in faith. And so faith is the foundation of our life in this world, our life with God. Hebrews 11 says this: faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we can't see, and it's impossible to please God without faith. Listen, we could spend the whole time just talking about what that scripture says, but the bottom line is this: there's a confidence that comes into our life when we have faith. It's more than just wishing for something to happen. And that's where I think we go wrong with resolutions. We're not really resolving to take the actions that we need to take, where this is different than that. This is a bigger step. And it says here that it's impossible to please God without faith. Well, that tells me that faith is really important. Okay. And this is why there are not many things in the Bible that says it's impossible. In fact, this is probably the only one. So pleasing God, a big part of it. And I want you to think for a minute about how God grows us in our faith. James says your faith is going to be tested. And when it's tested, it increases your endurance. And so he says, look, so just let it grow, let it be tested. And the point he's making is this: our faith grows by being tested. Ryan, let me kind of throw to you here on this question. In the last year, you stepped out of a familiar industry, the auto industry. You moved into agricultural world, the agricultural business. First of all, was your faith tested in the last year? And, you know, like, why did you do that? And talk to us a little bit about how it tested you.
Well, I think it's important to, when you start a side hustle, which was what my farming operation was up until really the last 12 months, maybe 18 months, there's a lot of comfort and there's a lot of safety when it's just your side hustle. And then when you take that leap, and everyone calls it the leap of faith, everyone says, well, you know, take the leap of faith. I think it's important to know that your faith is tested. And mine was truthfully tested every 2 weeks. because when you stop being an employee where you get a direct deposit every 2 weeks and you start working for yourself, and in agriculture, there might be one paycheck a year. Our operation, there's two. It's all investment, and you have to only rely on faith that it is going to happen. And you really don't know where you're at until it's over with. So my faith was tested truthfully every 2 weeks, and you're constantly trying to run back to safety. And that was one thing, when you talk about growth, there's so much pain that you have to volunteer for when you want to grow. You have to be intentional. So that is really the faith part of it. Was hard, and it wasn't perfect. And I knew weekly, monthly, going through my business and going through this transition, that it was the only thing that was going to get me through.
Yeah. But everything just went great for you, right? The whole year, you planted a bunch of little seeds and they just grew, and all the farm equipment worked great, and all the employees were awesome, right? And and the weather was perfect.
It was picture perfect the whole year. I think we all dream for those years. I think that's part of the hope when you run a business and it's on autopilot. And one thing John said is everyone wants to just go through these motions and get to this level of comfort. And I really think in agriculture and in any business, any endeavor, if it requires you to grow, there will be no comfort. There will be times of pause and rest, but then it's time to grow again. And that means saying no to comfort and saying no to safety. And I don't know if you can create value and still be comfortable.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, let me drill a little deeper with you on your story and on this point of growing in faith, because I know that you were involved in a men's group with Tim that was focused on spiritual growth, and you were in the auto industry, particularly automobile dealership sales environment, and I think probably a lot of times those environments are not real faith conducive. But were you experiencing that your growth in your faith with God was also resulting in some of your career growth because you were taking steps that you felt like God wanted you to take?
Yeah, I do. Up until about age 25, I'm just turned 32 a couple weeks ago. I was involved in automotive right out of college, and it was a great income, but men of faith were not huge parts of their career path. And so once about 25, I sat down at men's group with Pastor Tim, and we started talking about, true masculinity in the Bible, what it meant, the hard stuff. And it was the first time in my life that I said, wow, and the auto group at the time brought me into this 5:30 a.m. Conversation about God, the Bible, what it really means to be a man of faith. I said, wow, this is incredible. I wasn't going to get that in college. And so really started to develop my relationship with the Lord. I always believed in God, but did I have a relationship with the Lord? Absolutely not. Did I look at him as an ally? Absolutely not. I looked at the Lord as a father figure that was just there to get me in trouble. So through my time in the auto business, having that structure every Wednesday morning to where I first sat down, I can even speak at the table. I didn't have enough confidence in that topic to now 5-6 years later, doing a podcast with you guys can only be a testimony to the faith that I put in the Lord and all the ways he's grown my life since really committing. And it's certainly not been perfect. There's been mishaps. I'm still a sinner. That's not what I'm saying. But
you are? Oh yeah. My gosh, I can't believe it, man.
I didn't become a saint through the process. And I think that's important to realize. So yeah, it's paid dividends in my professional career. And I don't think that I would be farming or own my own business or even have the success in the automotive industry without being a man of faith and having that encouragement along the way and the wisdom.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Well, that's a great testimony. And of course I got to see a lot of growth I remember that the young Ryan, Mr. Kimbrel, coming to sit down at the table and over there in the corner of the room, and not a lot of words coming out of your mouth, but I could tell that Ryan really wanted to grow, that he wanted to learn. For one, he had to get there every week, which was not easy, right? It's super early in the morning. They work long hours in the auto industry. And I just grew to love this guy pretty quick, and just felt like God was doing something great in his life. And then I had the privilege of marrying him and his wife. And how long have you guys been married now?
3 years and 3 months.
3 years and 3 months. So we went to a really ugly location on top of a mountain in Telluride, right now, beautiful, looking out over the valley. And it was just an honor, to be a part. And I think for John and I, who we've been pastors for so long, I think one of the greatest privileges of our life has been watching people grow, learning, just seeing people take this seriously and realize that if they'll just put their life in God's hands, God will take them to places they never even thought were possible. Mm-hmm. And I love in the scripture, I love the word confidence, because so much of it, we struggle with insecurity, and God replaces that insecurity with confidence by growing us in our faith. So that's a big one. I do have to show you a picture. This is just so you know, how tall are you, Ryan? To me, you seem like you're about 7'5".
Take about 12 inches off that.
Okay, so 6'5".
Yeah, 6'4".
Yeah, 6'4". Here he's out there in this field. I just love this picture, because that's what growth looks like. Okay, that's what abundance looks like when God blesses you. You put all that work in. One of the parts of your story is you took over the farm when there was some struggle, right?
Took over the farm in really 2014. My dad got sick about the year I graduated college. And so I took over the farm, didn't really know what I was doing. Spent several years with just extra income from working for the other guy, working in auto, and tried to develop the land, started with water. And once that was actually about a 4-year project of wow. Passing up cool trucks and fancy toys, and drilling test holes in the middle of the desert to find water. And then once we found water, trying to figure out how to operate a business and how to actually operate a farm. So it started with land development, and ended with operating commercial agriculture operations. So long story, but so far it's not over. We're not out of the woods. Just because you have water doesn't mean that you can create life. But every year is learning, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and this picture goes to prove the old adage that Ryan is outstanding in his field.
Yes, there you go. Oh, wow. You had to say it.
I did.
You had to say it. John, just so you know, Ryan was in his 20s when he's making these decisions.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal, because you were successful in the auto industry. It was an industry you could have stayed in and continue to have made a good living in, but you felt, for whatever reason, that this was a venture that you needed to pursue. And I've heard the story secondhand, but what I've heard is that there was just a huge learning curve for you on a lot of things you had not done before, and you had to figure out the business model. And then once you figured it out, then all those components, can we make all these components work to make this thing happen? It's a big deal. So I guess the question is kind of on my mind is, why'd you do it?
It's funny when I wake up every morning, I ask myself that, why'd I go here? I think it's important to know, when you feel called to do something, even you don't want to do it. I I don't like risk. And in agriculture and farming, you have to be okay with risk. You have to be okay with spending the money and hoping things are going to come out. And I've always said, hope is not a business model. In agriculture, it's part of your business model. It is. And as much as we want to deny that, it is. And so, and in automotive, certainly. So when I did it, I think I was just trying to, there's a little bit of make your family proud, make yourself proud, make wise choices, all that went into it. And then I fell in love with the process of entrepreneurship. I fell in love with the process of building something that was my own, taking something in rough condition and making it the best that it can be. And I feel like that's really what God has done in my life too. I was pretty rough. And he's like, all right, if you'll get with me, I'm going to polish you the best way I can. Like, you're not going to be 100%, but we're going to take you as far as we can take you. And that's really what my passion for farming and agriculture is, when you take something that is just rough, barren land and turn it into something that, creates value for the world. So that would be the answer. Not fun, but rewarding.
Yeah, it's such a great model, Ryan. And so much a part of our core teaching of PPI is this exact thing that you're doing and that you're living. And just want you to know, we're proud of you, and we're gonna be sharing your story with a lot of people, because you are really a role model for create, own, and grow, which is our 3 principles of economic empowerment. Let me bring us to some questions for our audience today, which is, look, you got to come to this new year and say, where am I at in my faith? And be honest with yourself. Am I stuck? Am I satisfied where I'm at? Or do I really want to grow? And I just want to challenge you. And I think you've heard from both Ryan and John that I hope the value of growing in your faith. Don't stay the same. Please don't remain stuck. Reach out to us if you want us to give you some ideas of some things that would help you grow more in your faith. We're pretty good at that. And we've committed our lives to doing that for many people. And we'd love to help you with it as well. Let me go on also to our next point, which is this. You have to resolve to grow in knowledge and skill. So faith is kind of big and abstract. This is really specific, really practical. John, talk to us. John, would you read that scripture and talk to us about the importance of growing in knowledge and skill?
Yeah, so Proverbs 22:29 says, do you see someone skilled in their work? They will serve before kings. They will not serve before officials of low rank. So when we talk about the 4 things you have to be able to fulfill any job or role effectively, one of those 4 you have to have is knowledge and skill. So knowledge means what you know is true about that field, and skill is what you can do, what you've learned to be able to do. And so we have to be on a learning curve in whatever industry, whatever sector we're working in. If we're going to grow, we've got to grow our knowledge and skills on what we not know yet, or what is really true in this field, and what are we able to do that's new. So Ryan, I guess, I don't guess, I know you brought over some of your business knowledge and skills from your past to farming, but you were also coming into new stuff where you were having to say, I got to learn some new things in ag, and I've got to learn some new skills in ag. Tell us, what's something you have brought with you that you already had? What is something that you had to learn? And how did you go find where that knowledge is, or how do you learn that knowledge or skill? Where do you find that?
Well, I think it's important to note that I did start this journey with my partner, who is my cousin, and so he had probably more farming and has more farming, how to grow a plant and how to not lose your tail end while growing it. Him and his father, my uncle. So we started with their knowledge, a little bit of my knowledge passed down from my father too. But to the scale, when you go from dryland farming to irrigation, a lot changes. So my partner really invested a lot of time over the last year in bringing me up to a standard where I understood agriculture terminology, understood why we're doing it, how this goes, what the pros and cons, how to play defense, how to pesticides, herbicides. And then the other part of it too is, in our industry, call it crop scouting. We hired some crop scouts. A lot of them are 70-year-old men that are past where we're in this competition with each other. They're really just eager to share their knowledge.
What is a crop scout?
They go and take a look at your fields, and they tell you, here's the good, here's the bad, here's the ugly, and here's how to fix it. You got a bug problem, you've got a weed control problem.
Okay.
So they're really scouting and getting knowledge. You look low in fertility, you look low in fertilizer here, and then you go and you apply, and you're constantly going back and forth. And a lot of that only comes from experience. I think it's important to know when you jump into farming, specifically crops, you only get 30, 40 crops in a lifetime, and then that's it. You're done. So you have to look to the past. A lot of it is the older sage advice to, okay, what happened to you? How can I gain knowledge from that? Pastor Tim's always said, wisdom is learning from the other man's mistake. If you're not humble in agriculture and ask someone, what am I doing wrong? What do you think I could be doing better? And what would you do if you were me? Then you will fail. And through that knowledge is you develop a skill set. You start developing, okay, I remember this from 3 years ago. This is similar. Here's our approach. So it's really been so many people's knowledge building this farm with us and really building my skill set in an industry that I grew up around, but I wasn't super involved in, wasn't passionate as a young man. Wanted to be an athlete. It was cooler. Wanted to go to town. There was more things going on.
So what was a body of knowledge or a skill that you had developed in your past work that you brought over to the farming operation that you felt like that was good for us?
Early in my career, I was a general manager of a dealership at a rightful age of 26 years old, and I had no emotional intelligence at the time, but I understood a balance sheet, a financial statement, good business decisions. I didn't quite understand how to lead people or that people really made the businesses go, but I understood the blocking and tackling and how to raise capital, how to go and execute a business plan. And so I think that's probably what I brought to the farm on my side of things, is how to raise the capital, how to execute, and how to show that we can make this business make sense to a banker, or, at the end of the day, each business has to make sense on paper. And I think that gets lost a lot of times through passion, or we love it, or it's just going to happen. And so that's one thing in automotive. You have to start each month and each year with a game plan on how you're going to succeed, because there are small margins and there's a bunch of competition. So the auto business really taught me, in addition to Oklahoma State, on what running a business looked like. And then my partner and the ag community really taught me on what running a farm looked like. And it's still a work in progress.
So let me put some of this together in a pattern that we see over and over and over. And it doesn't matter whether we are in Africa or whether we are in America, the principle is still the same. And that is, when God calls you to a new level of creating new value, he will use what you already have. He will take what you already have and he will help you think through, how do I create more value with what I've got? And the way we see it in your story is you had business education and you had some business experience. You had farming connections, a little bit of farming experience, but you had farming connections with family and the people in that community. And you had vision of how could we take this whole thing to a new level of what it could be. and you brought in along an entrepreneurial spirit where you're like, I like the entrepreneurial journey. I like owning something and trying to create something bigger that I'm going to be at least an equity holder in what we're doing. Those are all things you had. They just weren't in the mix yet of the way they're in the mix now. It's like, you didn't decide to go into the rocket business and build a rocket and go to the moon. That was not in your hand. This is what was in your hand. And the reason I use that language, in your hand, I like to go back to when God first called Moses and he's out in the desert and he said, Moses, what's in your hand? All he had was a shepherd's stick in his hand. But what God was saying, I think what God was saying is, you already have the raw materials. Go with me and we're going to go to a whole new bunch of levels of where we're going to go with this thing. So that's one of the things I love about your story, and hearing you talk it out.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And like I was saying, Ryan, I think your story is a great role model for us to follow. And you started at such a young age of really learning, being committed to learn and grow and develop these skills. And, not everybody does that.
I think it's important, and this is one thing that I've always shared, because I try to be really humble about it, is you start where you're at with what you have. I had pretty humble beginnings. I think a lot of people don't quite realize what they have or what they have access to, and you just start. There's so many businesses in the world, and there's so much opportunity, but like John said, if you got a shepherd stick, maybe you want to be a shepherd, maybe you don't, but that's what you got. And I think that's one thing that has really helped me, is you start with what you have, where you're at, and you go at it. And you take one step and one time, and how can I better myself? How can I better myself? And as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, it's important to understand that you have to rest too, because you can always be doing something to better yourself.
Yeah.
And that was really probably the biggest lesson I took from this year, is it's okay to rest. It's not a race. You're competing against yourself, and it's okay to hit pause, charge up, and go again.
Yeah, great advice. And great advice. Let me wrap up this point. Here's what we're saying, folks. Make the commitment to be a lifelong learner. Never stop learning, never stop growing. When you stop learning and growing, you stop living. And I think one of the reasons why we have such a problem with midlife crisis in our country is because people stopped growing. Sometimes they stopped growing before they even got in their 20s, and they go their 20s and 30s, and all of a sudden they're in their midlife, and they're not where they want to be. They haven't grown into the person they need to be at that stage of their life. And so just get in there and do it. I love what you said. Just take the steps. It's super easy to get stuck in a rut. It's super easy just to keep everything in the comfort zone and stay the same. And I just don't see that relating to the life of faith. And I don't see that as growth. And so part of our challenge is just we're saying to you in this new year to ask yourself some questions about where you're at. Here's two of them that stood out to me. Number one, what am I doing to stretch myself? I mean, really, am I taking action to stretch myself beyond my comfort zone? And what am I doing to improve my knowledge and skill? And there's so many ways to do it, whether it's podcasts, books, listening to great messages, going to a great church. All these things contribute to it. And in my life, going to a great church has contributed incredibly to continuous growth. And one thing about being a follower of Christ is being a follower of Christ isn't about staying the same year after year after year. It's a call to growth and a call to action. Let me go on to our last point for today. And it's really a big one, and that is to resolve to grow in clarity. To grow in clarity. Romans 12 says this: do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then there's a result that happens. You're going to be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Here's what I think this means. It means growing in clarity means you're coming to a point where you can define more clearly. You're growing in the ability to define what God wants and what you want. What God wants and what you want. And I'm making an assumption here. I'm making the assumption that you want what God wants, that God has a higher authority in your life, and that if he wants something that's different than you, you're going to make an adjustment to him. And you said this earlier, Ryan, was it easy? Making this transition from the auto industry to farming wasn't like you were choosing the path of least resistance here. You weren't making a step into something that you felt was easier. You took a step because you felt it had a better outcome. And I do appreciate the personal reasons that you mentioned for getting involved in this. This was your family's farm. This is something that was kind of a legacy, right, issue in your life and your family. And I admire that. Not everyone gets opportunity to do that, but you did, and you took it on. John, would you talk to us just a minute about this whole area? I think one of the reasons why we often struggle to set goals and to create plans is because we don't have enough clarity to do either one. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think there's tremendous power in clarity. And I know when I have clarity, my energy is totally on point and good and strong when I have clarity. It's when I don't have clarity, I don't have energy. I don't have motivation. I've got to have a very clear sense of God's will and how does that combine with what I want, and I do want God's will, but how does all that work out? That I feel like I've got a clear sense of calling from God, and I've got a clear sense of how I'm supposed to go about doing that. So I think it all starts with seeking God's will. You know, when Ryan was saying earlier, this is a calling. I felt God called me into it.
Yeah.
And all of us who are following a calling, and all three of us are, when we're talking about our calling, sometimes it's hard for us to communicate it because we're not quite sure how we got there, other than we felt compelled.
Yeah.
And God uses all kinds of things to compel us, but we feel this sense of compulsion. And it's deep inside of us. It's not just pathology of our dark side of us that's driving us. It's our genuine pursuit of what does God want, and am I stepping up to the highest level of what God is wanting me to do? And when you have that clarity, it gives you the energy to overcome problems. All work is problem solving. So you better be working on something that you have clarity and motivation on.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're going to get beat down by the problems, which begs a question for me that I want to ask Ryan, and that was this: that in the process of turning the farming operation into a profitable business, I'm sure you did not leave the auto industry thinking, I'd like to make less money than I made in the auto industry. I'd like to do better. I'd like to create something bigger than what I came from. So in order to achieve what you were hoping to in your vision and in your mind, what is one or two of the biggest problems you felt like, I'm not sure how we're going to solve this, but here's a couple things. If we're going to get to where we need to get as a business operations, here's a couple of problems that we've got to solve. Can you name a couple of those?
I can. One of the things, a lot of business owners struggle with is hiring people and paying people. in agriculture, everybody thinks, well, I can just go do that myself, and I can just go do that myself. And we scaled in the last 18 months about 50% bigger than what we were 24 months ago. And so when I came and moved to the farm this past year, I thought I could just do boots on the ground every day. I didn't have to delegate any tasks, and then I could manage the operations, the financial end of our business at night, and then I could go to sleep. And what I forgot is that I had a wife, I had a relationship with God, I had 14 other friendships, and all these other things in my life that I really neglected because I refused to delegate tasks and teach and grow people below me. So as you scale and as you want something, you can't be greedy or so tight of holding on to all the power. You have to trust people, and we've brought a couple people along the way. This weekend we're bringing another family to see if they want to join our effort on the farm, and it's because you can't do it all by yourself. And in agriculture and really in farming in general, and I think people in South America can relate, can be lonely. It can be a place where a man isolates and he just handles it all himself. But through that, you will never see the success that God wants you to have. And when I left the auto industry, so much of what Tim did when we worked together was growing people. And at the time, I was like, great. We're going to bring some fluffiness. We're going to love on each other. Like, we're going to say how good we are. And then we're all going to go back to work because there's a job to do. And in agriculture, because it's labor and because it's mechanics and it's hard and there's profanity and maybe even a little whiskey here and there, people think it's not, the Christian thing to do, but you have to grow people. And that is your audience, is sometimes some rougher, tougher type men. And it gives you a chance to share your testimony. My stepdad, who passed away when I was 18, I actually learned this last year on the farm from another farmer, that he gave his life to Christ before he passed away on their farm, working for them. And he shared that with me, and what a amazing platform and what an amazing story to know that he gave his life to Christ when he was from a background where there was no other, there's nobody else talking about God in any other avenue than on the farm. And I think that's one of the things that's compelled me the most. Is it's a tough guy sport, but we're all humble to God on the farm. And it's really powerful to me, truthfully.
Wow.
Well, we see that in almost every industry, that no matter what business you're in, first you're in the people business. And I can see how you might go into the farming business kind of assuming, well, maybe this isn't quite the people business that other businesses are, but then you realize, dadgum, it's a people business all over again. You got to get the right team to pull off what you're trying to do. Not good. I like it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that story about your stepdad, Ryan. And, my dad was also led to Christ in that ranching world through a professional bull rider who was a cowboy preacher, led my dad to Christ. That whole world is a place for God to use you. And I guess for our listeners, I would just say, don't underestimate when you're seeking clarity in your life. You have to absolutely include God's will in it, and don't underestimate how God wants to use you in your field, whether it's, and we're kind of talking about career stuff here, but I don't like to separate them. I feel like your calling is your calling. So it may involve your career, it may involve your family, it may involve a ministry. For me, it's all inclusive.
Yeah, God is the God of everything. Life is just life.
Life is just life. And I don't like to separate them. I just like to say these are all the things that God has called us to do, and we're going to take action. So folks, listen, resolve to grow in clarity. And it's just such a critically important area. And let me give you some questions to consider. When I'm thinking about clarity, what do I really want in life? And how does that really relate to God's will? And so I stated it as what do I really want in life, but I'm telling you, I'm assuming here that like us, the other guys on the screen here with me, we all want God's will. Okay. We're not asking this question separately from wanting to know what God wants and what is his will for our life. What steps do I need to take to get started? Ryan had to take some really big steps starting several years ago. In this last year, he had to take some bigger steps to scale their farming operation. And you may need to think about as you start the new year, look, this is the perfect time to define the steps. Get clarity on the steps that you need to take. Don't make 20 of them. Identify maybe your top 1, 2, or 3 steps that you need to take. And then don't forget my favorite question. What else can I do to create the results I want? Don't wait for the results. Don't wait for somebody else to bring results to your life. What else can I do to create the results that I want? And get serious with the Lord, get alone with the Lord, and grow your faith in it. So in 2022, our challenge today is to say, I resolve to grow. I'm going to resolve to grow in faith. I resolve to grow in knowledge and skill, and I resolve to grow in clarity. And John's got some things to wrap us up today. And so I'm going to pass the baton back to you, brother.
Thank you, Tim. Great podcast. I appreciate you and appreciate Ryan, you and your story. Ryan, I picked up some from you and some from Tim. I want to, before we wrap all this up, I just want to talk real quickly about a couple of the big moves you made to transform a family farm into really a pretty sophisticated business. And what I picked up on, several of the big things you did were this. You went from dryland farming to irrigated farming, and that was transformational. You increased the size of land that you were farming through partnership, and that was big. And then another thing you did is you pre-negotiated a buyer for your crop. Do I have those stories correct? Were those big moves to try to get it where you wanted to
go? Yeah, that's 100% accurate. The industry is big. It's a high barrier to entry. You got to have a bunch of capital, which we did not have, still don't. But through partnerships, through knowing and marketing your crops, I think every business needs to know who their end consumer is. And really, you learn that it's business 101, but it can get pretty fuzzy on why am I growing this? How much am I going to make? How much is it going to cost me to grow? And keeping it kind of simple. So yeah, those are all accurate. And then knowing there's too much scale and then there's not enough. And through partnerships, some acquisitions, a lot of luck, a lot of good fortune, we were able to scale at a good time. And it's worked out. It might not always work out, and you have to be okay with assuming a little bit of risk in any marketplace you jump into. So yeah, that's you defined it really good. At the time, I was kind of just shooting from my hip and saying, this is what we got to do. This is the next step. And it just kind of folded that way. And I didn't start the journey thinking that's where it was going to be, but that's where it's at. And I think my partner and I, and even my wife that grew up, a block away from the what she calls Sooner Fashion Mall, has been okay with a little bit more rural way of life. And it's been good for us, really has. We're bringing new life into the world in May, be our first child. And so we're excited about growing a family with this new business too.
Oh, that's exciting. Congratulations. And one other aspect of the business that we were talking about before we went live on this podcast is you're also running a cattle operation. You're saying that right now you guys have about 1,000 head of cattle. So just another area of diversification and where the business is going. So So yeah, so let's bring it to a wrap. Pastor Tim, thanks for putting this together. Great concept of resolving to grow in faith and knowledge and skills and clarity. And thank you, Ryan Kimbrel, for being with us today and sharing your journey of being an ag business entrepreneur and following God's calling in your life to create great things. We appreciate it. Let me say again to our listeners that if you are enjoying these empowerment podcasts, would you like them and share them so that we can grow our empowerment community? And then finally, one more ask that I would ask of everybody as we are new into the year of 2022, would you resolve to become a monthly financial partner with People Prosper International? We are solving poverty through the church to change the world. And that's a great way to leverage your stewardship, because your money will be working around the world, both solving poverty, but empowering some of these great growing churches around the world. And we've committed our lives to it. Ryan Kimbrel is a generous supporter of PPI, so he's on board, and we're asking you to consider coming on board as a monthly financial partner with us in this year. So to do that, you can not only access a lot of great resources on our website, but you can also do your giving to PPI from our website, which is at www.peopleprosper.org. So until our next empowerment podcast, let me sign off by saying, go forth this year and grow, and go forth this year and conquer. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
God bless.